Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Last of Us Season 1, Episode 8. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we met... I can't remember where we started off, whether it was with Ellie and Joel first, or did we start... I think we started off with David and his crew. I did not remember the religious angle to his group. I mean, it's been a while. I remember the whole David section, but I didn't remember that aspect of, like, were they kind of, like, religious cultish? Or was it just, like, I remember the other thing about them. I was like, oh, yeah, that I was like, isn't that their shtick? And then, like, it came up and I was like, okay, I thought so. But I didn't remember the religious angle to it. I was like, the whole him being a teacher before and then a preacher, I'm like, that probably did happen in the game, and I just don't remember it that well. But I love how they set that up too, especially because it's like, right, the little girl that's crying and she's like, yeah, your dad's dead, but the ground's too, like, snowed over and hard for us to, like, dig. And like the moment's like a dead dad, I was like, university guy that Joel killed. Which, I mean, obviously, like, that's also the interesting thing about those games. You can either, like, there's times where you're going to have to fight, but a lot of that stuff, if you're really, really good, I guess you could, like, sneak around without killing every single thing in every area in the game. So, I mean, obviously, Joel walked away only killing one person out of, like, a group of four. He only killed one person. Obviously, it's like, I think it's way more people in the university in the game. But it's like, yeah, like, you can end up killing a lot of people. But, I think it's at least one canonical person he kills is, like, the person that flies out the window. Because, like, I brought it up in, like, episode 6. He gets stabbed by a broken bat in the show, but I'm pretty sure he falls out the window when he's fighting someone and lands on a piece of rebar, if I'm not mistaken. I might be misremembering. Either way, tangents and all that aside, the moment they introduced that element, I was like, that's the little girl. Her dad was killed by Joel. It's like, right, because I knew that's why they would have some spice for Joel, because it's like, yeah, you killed some of our people. In this case, one of our people. Now, I got super hyped when I saw Troy Baker. I was like, Troy! Obviously, we all knew he was going to be in this. That was the, if you don't know who Troy is, obviously, prolific voice actor in general. Assortment, long laundry list of assortment of characters. Obviously, if you want to go down the Naughty Dog route, he voiced Sam, Nathan Drake's brother, in the 4th game in the Charted series. But yes, he's also, Last of Us wise, he mocapped and did the voice for Joel. But yeah, I knew him and Ashley Johnson, who mocapped and voices Ellie, were in this, but no one knew what the roles were. The fact is, Ashley's not in this episode. I was like, okay, so she's got to be in the season finale. So I'm like, the question is she going to be a Firefly or is she going to be a Doctor? If you know the story, you know, like, what context I'm talking about. I was like, I'm almost going to, like, I want her to be, well, her being one or the other doesn't really mean anything when it comes to the way the story plays out, but regardless. But I was like, you're one of David's people, because I was almost wondering, I was like, are they going to cast him as David? I was like, but it's like, no, he's David's, like, right-hand dude, James. But nevertheless, like, their people are starving, hence why they turn to the whole, spoilers, cannibalism thing. I'm not saying spoilers, like, but I mean, jumping ahead a little bit, the cannibal thing. So... at the same time, Ellie, trying to do everything she can to take care of Joel. She sewed up the wound, but obviously, like, she needs the antibiotics to, like, fight the infection. She also needs to get food because there's very little left, and so she went hunting. So they don't do the scene from the game, the meme of, oh god, this streamer, I'm blanking on her name, but she's the meme associated with it, where it's like, yeah, like, the scene, she's like, oh my god, such a cute bunny, and then Ellie shoots him with an arrow, and she has, like, oh my god, she has a devastated reaction because it comes out of nowhere. But yeah, that meme, I was wondering whether they were going to recreate that scene or just, like, Ellie shooting the rabbit, but it's like, no, they didn't. I believe that's how the situation went down with her running into David. It was like a deer situation. Obviously, in the gameplay wise, you, like, have to deal with like he helps you. He becomes a temporary ally if you, like, fight off, like, the infected and stuff. But the moment they crossed paths, I was like, oh, and I love how they did it, because it worked like that in the game too. It's like, because in the show they give you the context, like, you can probably figure it out early on with the context. You're like, is he connected to the university? You might figure that out on your own. It's not constructed like that in the game. That obviously the scene with David, kind of getting that insight to his people doesn't happen at least in that capacity, the religious group and him kind of giving a sermon type of thing. Like, that doesn't happen in the game. That is just from the show. Just a little added flavored text, flavored elements to it. But it's like, yes, his encounter with Ellie is kind of the same way in the game. It's just like, hey, I'm just some random guy that happened to be out there. Oh, we fought off infected. Let's chill and wait for my people to find me. And then, like, him kind of doing that reveal. He's like, oh, no. Like, God works in mysterious ways. I mean, if you don't believe so, he's like, yeah, this crazy guy killed one of my people. And it's like, oh, he was rolling with a little girl. And he's like, see what I mean? I was like, I love the creepy smile across his face while he's singing it. It's like, yeah. I mean, like, before we even got to that, it was interesting to hear him say, like, oh yeah, I found religion after the world ended. I was like, that is kind of interesting. But he was like, yeah, after Pittsburgh fell, I took a select few people with me. Then along the way, we picked up more and more people. Because Ellie was like, yo, this sounds a little cultish. He's like, but I'm sure, like, someone would be like, certain religions can definitely lean very cultish, and he definitely gives cult leader vibes, because when that little girl who lost her dad was like, you should kill them both, and David just walks over, I was like, are you about to do something? And then he slaps his shit. I was like, it made me go, yo! I literally audibly went, oh! Because I wasn't fully expecting him to do that, because once again, we never really, like, it's little moments like that, but we never really get a lot of insight into his group. Once again, there's a lot of Last of Us stuff note-wise that I don't remember, so some of that might have been, like, flavor text and, like, notes and stuff. You might pick up on some of that. Because when you roll through, like, David's crew, it's mainly, like, kind of like Raiders. It's, like, people, like, bundled up, so, like, oh, they're trying to, like, kill you whether you're Ellie or whether you're Joel. I think I brought this up in episode 7, last episode. I think I brought it up, but if I didn't, if this is the first time you're hearing it, you're not well versed in the game or just don't know. The interesting thing is, in this section of the game, you are playing Ellie. I think when Ellie does get captured, like she does in the show, like it happens in the game, you do, I think if I remember correctly, you do switch back and forth. Like, the moment Joel gets up and about, when he, like, goes to try and find Ellie, you do switch back and forth between them. You can't control it, obviously. A certain section is like, once you get to a certain point, you switch back over to the other. Like, Ellie basically has her boss fight with David. But anyway, I'll circle back to that. Because obviously Ellie's, like, young and inexperienced and all this. I think it takes a lot of smarts to the fact that she took their guns, like, while they, like, she made sure to unload their guns, their rifles, that she had them drop down. But James rolled through, and he actually did bring back the medicine, but David knew, like, right, she's so inexperienced, like, she's not used to doing this all on her own, so she didn't think to probably, like, do everything she can to cover her trails. She doesn't have as much experience. Like, let's not forget, yeah, she's been with Joel, he's teaching her stuff in that, but this is still her first outing in general out to the outside world, outside of Boston. So she doesn't know, like, how she should handle herself, like, strategically and stuff like that. She knew to take out the bullets of the gun, which was smart, but she didn't probably do a good enough job covering her trail. She probably thought, like, the snow would be enough, but the snow in conjunction with probably, like, broken branches and stuff, if you're good at tracking, you'll probably be able to track her down. But yeah, she went back to Joel, luckily took care of him. But David's like, oh no, we're going to spare the girl. We're going to get justice. We're going to bring that guy back here. We're going to put him on trial. I'm like, if no one else going to point out the fact is Joel was in self-defense. It's not like Joel went out like, oh, you're here, I'm going to kill you. It's like, we were literally leaving. Your guy rode up on me with a bat, tried to bash my head, and it was pure self-defense. You know, and it's like, but that doesn't matter, you know? Because even David later on is like, oh yeah, like he was trying to defend you. So like, you know it and you don't care. Because it's like, yeah, they want vengeance. But it's like, yeah, I mean, regardless of it, which obviously is a theme in The Last of Us, an important theme to kind of keep in mind is revenge. Revenge is a powerful theme in this universe. So just kind of a major theme to keep in mind. I feel like people kind of attribute it to 1, but I feel like 1 isn't as, I mean, except for this section, 1's not as revengey, but I feel like in the show, they've definitely, like, handled the theme of revenge a lot more than I feel like the game did. Because, like, revenge wasn't as much of a theme, at least in the first game, it is in the second game. Like, revenge is the major theme, and so I wonder, is that why they're shifting some of that stuff in especially, like, they set it up with the Sam and Henry stuff and the Kathleen stuff. I should also talk about that too really quickly. Let me finish my point first before I circle back around. The fact is that they've set up that whole revenge theme element of like, yeah, it always comes to come bite you in the ass. And so they've kind of leaned into the revenge element a lot more than I feel like the original game did. Like I said, it's definitely a major theme in 2, but not as much 1, at least from my remembrance. But the point I was going to make is it made me remember. I should have brought this up earlier. I meant to bring it up earlier when I was talking about Troy Baker. Was the fact that he's not the only one from the game who's made an appearance. I completely forgot about this. I kept forgetting to talk about it. But for example, the actress who plays Marlene in the show is the actress from the game. The same thing is, I also found out that Kathleen's right-hand man, the dude who got his head ripped off by the bloater, that's Tommy from the game. I had no idea. I think I knew about the Marlene thing. I just kept forgetting about it over and over again because I think I remembered hearing, because I've also seen her, but I like the actor who played Tommy, I don't think I'd seen him before. That's why, like, the moment I saw Troy, I was like, Troy! Because also I watch, I've seen Troy Baker enough, like, around the internet, but also, like, obviously I watch Play, Watch, Listen, the podcast with, like, him. It's on Alana Pierce's YouTube channel, but it's Alana, Mike, Austin, and him. Whenever they're all 4 able to get together, obviously, like, they all have busy schedules and stuff like that. So regardless, tensions and all that aside, so that like, obviously, like, Troy and Ashley, I'm way more familiar with, like, their faces, but the others I wasn't as much. So. But like I said, tangents and all that aside. But getting back to it, sadly, David's taken an interest in Ellie. Really quickly too, I do apologize because I'm just remembering stuff off the top of my head. When they were like preparing the food, and they were like, "What is this?" And the guy's like, "Venison." I was like, "Oh, they got that deer here that fast?" And then the deer came through with David and James. I was like, "Oh, okay, right. That's right. That is in fact your shtick." So I was like, okay, you're already at that point. It's like, well, before Ellie even got there, they were obviously already at that point, even in the game. So I was like, okay, you were about that time already. Like I was like, that's why I was like, huh, interesting. But it's like, we find out later on, I don't know if that works that way in the game or not, whether they're all aware. Only a few people, probably like James and some of the more like the people who probably went looking for Ellie with him are the only ones who probably knew the truth about, like, yeah, we eat people. I can only assume maybe that's implying that girl's dad, that's probably his body. That's probably why the lie about, like, yeah, the ground's too hard to bury him. It's like, well, we have meat, so we might as well use it before it completely spoils. Because I'm like, because people would start noticing if people started disappearing, especially if people don't know. Like, the general group doesn't know. So I don't know if that's the first time they've done that, or it probably isn't. Maybe other people that come along, they've done that. Other people they found, they've done that. But yeah, they were desperate. They were out of food. It makes sense. I mean, not make sense. It doesn't make it okay, but apocalypse, you're desperate and, scarce supply of food and stuff. But regardless. But David had taken an interest in Ellie and wants to bring her back. And he made a whole stake to it. It's like, right, we'll kill the guy, we'll get justice, but we'll bring her, because, it's all about mercy and stuff. I also noticed too, like, am I crazy? Didn't it seem like he had the biggest plate of it? It looked like he had the most food on his plate. Like, because everyone else getting, like, small, because you gotta spread it around, but I'm like, his plate looked pretty damn full, but maybe that was just me. It looked like it was much more. Maybe because he actually had a plate. Some of the other people had, like, straight up bowls, so maybe that kind of obscured it a little bit, but it seemed like he had way more food, especially the way people were chomping down because they were all starving. So maybe he kind of got the bulk of the food because he's the leader and stuff like that. So, but obviously Ellie tries to distract all of them and say, "Hey, I'm gonna draw them away. Joel, do not fall back to sleep. I'm leaving you this knife. Please be safe." And I thought it was interesting that James was going to kill, because one of the guys was like, "Go ahead and do it." I wonder, is it just because, like, right, she needs to die because James thought was like, well, she needs to die because, or I get your mercy, but we need to let her go. Just let her go out in there a while, because if we don't, that's just another mouth we'll have to feed. Plus, once again, kind of leaning into that revenge theme, she'll probably just come back after everything that's going down. But I think also maybe James was thinking, like, yeah, let's kill her, and we'll have, I was like, oh, sorry, we did this, David, but alright, we got more food, so maybe that's also a combination of everything, but David's like, no, you want the guy, go get your pound of flesh, But Joel wasn't going to take that lying down. I mean, he might be pretty hurt, but it's like, I love that. It's like, yes, the whole buildup has been about how Joel is not that person. He tried not to be who he's been for the past 20 years. Tries to be a better person for Ellie. Once again, Ellie's like, right, he doesn't do that unless it's necessary. He doesn't go around killing innocent people. Yeah, these guys were coming to kill you. They had Ellie and everything. So seeing Joel, like, because we've seen Joel be brutal. Like earlier on in the show, that brutality, we saw it in episode 1. We've also saw it, I make that argument, that guy, Kathleen's guy, Brian, who he stabbed, we saw some of the brutality there. We learned about what he's done in the past, but since then, he's kind of been on the softer side. This is when you go like, now we're leaning into like, all right, I gotta be that guy again. So like, carving up one dude, like stabbing him, and he's like, tell me, or I'm gonna like pop out your kneecap. And because it plays out like that, just like in the game of like, all right, better pinpoint me where we are, where they are. It better be the same thing as your buddy over there when I ask him, because if not, it's gonna be a problem. He's like, see, this is where he is, this is where he is. He's like, cool, thanks. Stabs the guy. He's like, you fucker, he told you exactly what. He's like, no. He's like, I won't tell you anything. It's like, don't worry about it. I believe your buddy over there. Grabs a pipe and bashes his head, which was just kind of like immediately, once again, being a little more well-versed in like the games. Not just, 1, but 2, I feel like that's very poetic. And it's just setting the stage. And once again, like that revenge theme, that brutality theme, really like setting the stage for him. Like, dude, I think Christian talked about it recently, him and Roxy, because him and Roxy know about the story of 2, and they're like, how are people going to react to some of the story elements? Because I'm not well versed in 2. I know the quote unquote thing of 2. That's about it, and that's like obviously in the first chunk of the game, like really pretty early on in the game. So I don't know. I know probably like maybe a third of the game, and even that was like years ago. So I don't know. I don't even know how 2 ends. I remember like the halfway point when a thing happens. That's about it. That's as far as I know. 2 storyline. I do want to change that before season 2 rolls around for the show. But either way, it's just like there's so much stuff that like is so very foreshadowing that I'm like, I don't know if it's just kind of like because the game is just designed that way, or it's just them leaning into it for the show. There's certain elements I'm like, it feels like they're leaning into the show to set the stage for season 2 when they cover part 2 story, So I don't know. I just think that's just kind of interesting. But regardless, David ended up having Ellie locked up, and it's like, yeah, you're something special. You remind me of you. You remind me of like me. Like the fact is you have this leadership quality in you. Because for him, it's like, I'm only in this position because so many people rely on me. Like they look at me as like a father figure. And when he was saying the father stuff, I was like, when he was like, oh, you have another father. I'm like, oh, you mean in like the biblical, like religious God type of way. And he was like, and then he sat at the table, was like, oh, you mean you. Because he was like, yeah, you don't interrupt your father when he's talking. I was like, oh. I remember some of the subcontext for like David's stuff that was like very like rapey, that I was like, I didn't remember I didn't know if that's what they were kind of implying with that, because the mother was just kind of like, once again, it's that cult leader thing of like, yeah, I'm the leader of a cult. That means I have to have sex with everyone. Oh, you're underage? Who cares? It's like, oh, Jesus. I was like, oh. Because they were, like I said, I think it was pretty implied in the game, at least like when it came to Ellie, but I don't remember if it was just like straight up like that from like, once again, maybe there's note stuff that like talks about that, but that made me kind of get that vibe, especially because I knew about how he acted around Ellie, that I was like, is that kind of implying like even she, and like the mother's like reaction makes me go like, because everyone was staring during that whole thing, so it's kind of like, once again, cult leaders like having sex with their flock, as he kind of refers to him as. And that's why he's taking an interest in Ellie, because it's like, hey, you and me, you had that leadership potential in you, because he's like, I see it in you. He's like, the fact is, if I left this knife here with you, you would gut me the moment you got, because you have that potential of violence in you. And he makes this kind of connection with like the cordyceps. It's like, right, what does a cordyceps do? He's not even talking about religion. He's talking about, I connect with the cordyceps because it does what it needs to survive, to protect its children, to kind of spread itself. And that's what we humans do. Like, it does what it needs to, and by relying on the capacity of violence. So there's so many parallels that can be drawn in that regard. I mean, obviously with the overarching like theme of just like killing people to kind of survive in this world, but especially with the Joel and Ellie of it all. But him making that point about the cordyceps and him kind of connecting in that regard. But he sees something special in Ellie. It's like, yeah, we could be great together. And he's touching her hand and everything. I was like, ew, ew, ew. But then she like breaks his finger. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But he bashes her face against the wall. And I love it. It's like, Ellie. It's like, what? To Ellie. Tell him that's the name of the girl that broke your fucking face. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, what was that you said? Itty bitty pieces, right? I'm like, oh boy. Because I remembered how it goes down. So him and James come in. They're ready to slice and dice her. But she's like, wait. I'm infected. He's like, no, you're not. And she's like, no, check my arm. Go ahead. She's like, there. I'm infected. So are you too? I'm like, yes. If you don't know, it's a spoiler, but I won't get into specifics. Similar thing happens in The Walking Dead too. Obviously this scene is like straight out of the game, but like, yeah, that same thing happens in The Walking Dead. Like spoilers, there's cannibals in The Walking Dead. There's only like one set of cannibals in the show. And they were part of the season, but they were only like a couple episodes. They were a main thing in the season. But either way, I felt so bad when Ellie picked up the hatchet. I was like, no, Troy! It's like, I mean, your character says, but it's like, no, Troy! I was like, I'm pretty sure you weren't going to make it out of this. I'm sure the same thing happened to that character. Like, David's the only person from that crew I remember having a name. Maybe James was like a significant person, or maybe it's just like a character made specifically for Troy in this. But yeah. I was wondering if there was something deeper there, because obviously, I won't lean into that. I was just curious, because I think Troy's a religious enough person, I think. So that's why I was wondering whether that was kind of like supposed to be a little bit of a parallel. Like, obviously this is kind of like someone kind of leaning more cultish and like, but I was like, kind of having your faith in someone and wanting to believe in them despite the stuff. Like, I was wondering if like, that's why I was like, I'm probably reading too much into that. But it's because I know, like, I believe Troy's a man of faith or something like that. I feel weird saying it because I'm not a religious person. I don't know where my belief system lies. But that's why I was like wondering, it's like, oh, is that why that character is also crafted like that? Or what's a character, like I say, I don't, like, David's the only character I remember from the game. So I don't remember any like sidekick named James. Might have been, but I just don't remember. But yeah, the whole restaurant scene is obviously straight out of the game. That's why it's kind of like a boss fight, because Ellie has, like, I believe her knife, her butterfly knife, and like, yeah, like, you can sneak attack the guy, but that's how you do it little by little. You have to sneak around the restaurant, like, there's broken glass around, and he will find you. Like, the only way you can hurt him is if you have to like stealth attack him. You won't be able to kill him, but you'll jump on him and you'll stab him. And that's how you have to do it a couple of times. And the restaurant that you're in is straight on fire, straight out of the game. I love how they handle that. And Ellie getting hers, like, in the end. And because I don't remember if it got that point. I think it probably did. I don't remember as much from the game, but him just being like, he's like, I like the resistance or the fighting, and you're just like, oh god, dude. And then Ellie gets hers by like, slicing him up. It's like, and I think it's straight out of the game that they do that too, where it's like, I think blood splattering on the screen, on the camera, I think happens straight out of the game too. But yeah, like, Ellie got him good. And I thought it was kind of interesting how they designed that too, because like in the aftermath of like when she was done, leaning into that capacity of violence she's capable of. I mean, anyone would be in a desperate situation like that, fighting just to survive. Like, once again, that whole point of him being like, oh, we're all animals, and some lean into that aspect of the human genome, the human DNA, of that animalistic instinct. Some lean into it more than others. Obviously, for some, it just kicks in when it comes to the self-preservation or protection of others. So, But when it's all said and done, like, because I think in the game, Joel finds her in the restaurant while it's still burning. I believe that's what happens. In this, they make it so she makes it outside and he finds her. But it's like, yeah, that look of her just being scared because she was like, no, let me go, let me. And it's just like, okay, it's you. And he's like, and his exact words, I got you, baby girl. It's like, oh, you know, because he's never talked about Ellie that way before. So saying that, because for him, it's back to episode 1 again of like, he can't completely shake it. It's like, right, you aren't Sarah, but you are my responsibility. It isn't just, you are no longer cargo. You are someone I care about. I want to protect you. I need to protect you, not just because of the greater mission, because it's like, it is something I care about you. That's why I want to leave you with Tommy with episode 6, because I thought I'd fail you. I thought I'd get you killed, and I can't fail another little girl that relies on me to take care of her. I wasn't able to protect Sarah. I'm not going to fail you again, especially when she was gone. So, and I think that's the brutalness of that whole situation too. Yes, Joel comes to save her, but it's after everything. Ellie, like, saves her. I hope no one says anything stupid like, oh my God, making it so woke that, yeah, the girl had to say, like, I hope I don't hear that bullshit. I legitimately hope the internet's wilding, bro, so I don't know if someone's gonna have that take. I'm like, bro, straight out of the game, you're gonna be like, oh, they make this woke stuff where she has to save herself. Like, I don't want to hear that. She saves herself in the game. Literally, Joel, like, yeah, takes out some guys to get to Ellie, but it's all done by the time Joel gets to Ellie, even in the game. It's literally the same thing, so I better not hear anything about that. But to me, that's what adds to the brutalness of it. Like, in a moment like that, all she could do was rely on herself, because a lot of situations, she's luckily had Joel be there. Even with the whole situation of Sam turning, there was at least Henry and Joel there. This is a situation, once again, like, she didn't know, like, when it was like, oh, I need to give you these antibodies, like, antibiotics. Where do I put this, Joel? Like, where do I inject you with this? So she was, like, winging it. She was winging everything. And now it's a situation of, like, this is a situation where she was very much, like, back against the wall, desperate, fighting, and she managed to fight on her own. But that's enough to, like, scar anyone, that experience. And the sad thing is, she did have, luckily Joel's there to have her back, but it's like, once again, she still had to go through that. And then there's that guilt of, because at least in the game, he saw what she did. Like I said, if I remember correctly, I could be, but like I said, I think in the game, Joel entered the restaurant while it was on fire and saw the aftermath. In this, he doesn't. It's already said and done. And I think that adds to it, because that was a little bit of an awkward thing between them. Like, Ellie doesn't talk about what happened. Because I think when he first grabs her and he's like, okay, it's me. She's like, he tried to, and that's all she's able to get out in the game. And that's why she's almost she's shaking, even like in the show, understandably. But it's like, it was just too much. And because, spoilers, the next time we catch up with them, it's another time skip. Like, it's been like some time later. I think it's implied that it's maybe been another couple months because it's spring. So I don't know if the show's going to really cover those conversations, because I'm pretty sure the game doesn't. Because immediately after the David stuff, you skip. Like, it's after Joel gets Ellie, it's immediately skip. Just like, once again, in the show, they leaned into it. Like, after Sam and Henry died, they got buried. That's not the case in the game. After Henry kills himself, after he pulls the trigger, cut to black, boom, it's a couple months later, they're at the dam. So I'm curious to see how they handle that going into the next episode, which is the season finale. I'm so curious, because to me, like, I'm so curious to see what the story is, because I could honestly say, like, probably, like, you could fit the final section, like the main story beats, because obviously you have your, like, oh, we're dealing with, like, the infected, you still have to fight, to get there. I believe that, so, like, I could probably say, like, the, like, story beat stuff, I could see that being, like, 25 minutes of the episode, maybe like half the episode. So I'm like, where are they going to pick up? Like, what are some of the dialogue things that are going to happen? They'll probably lean into, like, that section of, like, it's because I am spoiling it, but where they end up at the end, it's probably going to be a lot more of the episode than it probably would have been because in the game, it's like there's the gameplay sections as well. So That's definitely going to be interesting to see how that, what changes they ultimately end up making. Because I doubt the ending's going to be different. I think they're going to, because it's such a, the ending's the way it is on purpose too, because that also plays such a role in two. It plays such a role in Joel and Ellie's dynamic and everything. Because I'm sure like it's going to be verbatim. The last scene of the season finale probably going to be exactly like the ending of the game, because it's so poignant in that regard. It's such an ending where you're like, huh. I'm so curious, because I'm sure that's going to be my interest. That I'm going to be so interested to find out is how those who don't know the story of the game, how are they going to feel about the ending? Because I could see that being an ending that, because I think even with the original, I think even with the game, I think some people are like, oh, some people like the ending, other people didn't. I mean, that's just my experience. So maybe it's a thing of more people liked it than I kind of give it credit for. But either way, I'm so fascinated to see the season finale, see what's exactly the same, what they changed, what they might have added. Will stuff be contextualized a little bit differently? We'll ultimately have to wait and see what the season finale has in store for us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, really quickly before I wrap this up, I should have talked about this too. I think it is such an interesting thing too, because it's kind of like that in the game. It's not like once again, it depends. Like if you go hard, like balls to the wall, hard, crazy, killing everyone in David's group. Like obviously that's not really reflected in the game, except for like the gameplay elements of you clear this area because there's no more people. But it is interesting that his people are just without anyone. I'm fairly certain that doesn't come up in 2, but once again, not as well versed into part 2 story as I am part 1. So, but it's his group is now just, because he's the one that kind of kept them alive, because once again, they didn't even know about the whole, they got some food left because of the deer and stuff, but not less some of the people, once again, all the cannibal people who knew that they were eating, knew that those might all be dead. Especially now that James is dead, and some of those other people that Joel killed were probably the only ones that were in the know, so those people are probably going to starve or just kind of scattered to the wind. Might be for their benefit, considering, David was that cult leader kind of running things. They kind of had an element of fear when it kind of came to him, so might be better off without him. They're going to be kind of a lost flock without him, but, once again, unless that's a part 2 thing that I'm not aware of, it's just kind of we just leave that as is, it is kind of just its own thing that you never circle back to. So that was just kind of going through my mind when I was thinking about the very ending when they're just walking around. Oh yeah, you're walking away. It's who's going to come after you? You're probably in a section of town where only they're at. The people are probably somewhere else. They're not even aware of everything that was going down. So because there was no shots fired, because it was knives and a hatchet that were used. So probably won't get there till after the fact. Once that place starts burning down. So. But either way, like I said, before I cut myself off, we'll have to wait to see what happens next. But till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.